Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for being here. If you're new here, hello, my name is Patty and I make lots of videos about books. In today's video, this is gonna be my 2024 quarter reading wrap up. So I'm super excited to be filming this today. I, so far, for this first 3 months of the year, have read 12 books. So far I'm reading at a pace of like 4 books a month, which is pretty on par with, having a full-time job, making sure I work out, making sure I eat healthy, keep up with my friendships and my relationship. I will now be taking you through the books that I read. So I will show you the stack first. So here are the physical books that I read. I have 7 books here, and then the remaining books I read on my Kindle. So I am partially going to be reading off of my Notion page, which is where I leave my personal reviews on Goodreads. I just put the physical ratings, and by the way, my Goodreads will be linked in the description below if you're interested in becoming my friend on Goodreads. But I mostly just leave star ratings on Goodreads, but then I like having my own personal thoughts like on my Notion page. Starting off with the first book that I read this year, it was Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. So this is a YA fantasy book. So this is a YA romance fantasy book revolving around 2 main characters who are rivals at work, and then within their potential relationship and blooming romance, there is a war going on in the background that is revolving around mythology and just their gods and everything. And there's magic with typewriters and everything, and love letters and whatnot. But anyway, I rated this book 3.25 out of 5 stars, which is pretty uncommon for this book. A lot of people on booktube and book talk and just people I know really love this book. And I feel like the more and more I read YA books, the more I realize I don't like them. I feel like a lot of the aspects of romance that I enjoy also involve just like more adult things, if you catch my drift. And yeah, I just feel like I didn't feel their passion enough. I just feel like, yeah, they were into each other, but I didn't feel their devotion as much as other people did. Like, I personally was more into the political things that were going on in the background. Like, I was really interested in the war that was going on and everything, but it seems like to other people that wasn't really what interested them. But anyway, my review. This book for me was a 3.25 out of 5 stars. It was not the greatest start of the year, especially after reading Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, which turns out were some of my favorite reads of 2023 and of all time. That played into my lower rating in the fact that I was trying to read it as fast as possible for a reading blog. Overall, the plot of the story was interesting in my opinion, with the details of mythology and the war going on. The love story seemed like it was supposed to be the best part, but it fell a bit flat. Their banter and letter exchanges didn't seem so strong and passionate, and their rivalry didn't seem as intense either. Honestly, in my head, it kind of seemed one-sided. I feel as though their love was lacking, and therefore barely made me feel any sort of strong emotions towards the book. It was a like, but definitely not a love. So even though I didn't love this, I immediately went into Ruthless Vows, which is the end of the duology for this series. I was doing it for a reading blog. Otherwise, I don't think I would have picked up the second book, but I actually ended up rating this one a little better. I did enjoy it a lot more. So this was 3.75 out of 5 stars for me. So as I was mentioning before, the political aspects of this book were definitely more enticing in my opinion, and this one was a lot more war heavy and just getting into the mythological aspects of it all. And I know it's funny, I actually the other day was watching a vlog from Destiny Sidwell, and she was reading this book and she was talking about basically the opposite of what I liked about this book. She was saying that because this was more political and she loved the romance more, she didn't like it as much. So it's kind of funny, but typically I'm a lot more into the romance, but I think just this in general did it a lot more for me. And I felt their love a lot more in this one. So I said, I thoroughly enjoyed this book a lot more than Divine Rivals. I think it's becoming harder for me to enjoy YA books more now, but I still think this book was fun. I felt their love for each other a lot more in this book, especially from Kit. His way with words was so beautiful, and the way he thought about her made me feel it more than Iris's. So interesting to think about personal decisions in a time of war and ethical questions. I found myself questioning what I would do, because even though I think I would be on the right side of the question, you never know until you're in it. Either way, this book was more action-packed and I felt a clearer connection to every character. So overall, much better than last time. So the next 2 books that I read were actually memoirs, and once again, I did a reading vlog for these 2. Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. I know this book is super, super popular amongst book talk, and just for people, recommended to people who are within my age range, just like early 20s, you know, barely getting into life, barely figuring yourselves out and everything. And I think a lot of people recommend this book because of that reason. It's mostly directed towards people who feel like they're kind of lost in life and feel like they haven't found true meaning in what they're doing right now. And obviously most of you guys, I've seen my demographics on my YouTube channel. I know a lot of you guys are in the similar age range, which is nice. I know that a lot of people kind of feel that way in their early 20s, especially as they're like right out of college, like trying to figure out life, like, you know, starting a career and everything, building relationships. But at the same time, I feel like social media has made a really big push to make you feel like you have to have your life figured out this early in life. And it's like, bro, like we're literally so young. You don't have to have anything figured out. But in my head, I didn't really relate too much to this book just because of the fact that I feel like, and something that I'm incredibly grateful about, like I feel like my life is pretty stable and like my relationships and the things that I put my time and effort into. And Dolly's life is kind of like extremely chaotic, putting herself in horrible situations, like having relationships with not so great people. And I feel like I'm grateful in that I have very stable things and stable relationships in my life. So honestly, I couldn't really relate to this at all. And so it was more just like kind of entertaining. Like there was a lot of like entertainment factor in this, and like that was fun, but overall I didn't really love it as much as everyone else did. So 3.25 out of 5 stars. I think this book was definitely eye-opening for people who think that they're behind in life, comparing themselves to how quickly their friends seem to have their life together, when in reality everybody lives life at their own pace. At the same time, this book presents Dolly's issues in relationships growing up, realizing that she is the largest contributing factor in the problem. She herself has dependency and trust issues, and with the help of therapy realized it and helped herself. You cannot make someone love you enough to love yourself. And though your friends are the ones who you can always trust and fall back on when things work out, you shouldn't resent them or their partners for prioritizing each other. So that is what I took away from the book. But overall, I'm glad I read it, but did I love it? No. Going into the next memoir that I read that actually was a love. This is The Woman in Me by Britney Spears. And if you are at all familiar with what happened with Britney Spears in the early 2000s, her having her unfortunate mental health breakdown, and also just with recent news like in 2020 with what happened with her conservatorship, if you are at all interested in learning more about that, I highly recommend this book. I think the writing style was so easy to get to just because it seemed like it was like she was talking to someone, like therefore you're reading and like having a conversation with her. And it was, I'll be honest, like heart-wrenching just learning all the horrible things that she went through and how strong she was, even though people on the outside obviously see her have mental breakdown and everything, and you think like, oh, like she's so weak, like what could she possibly be going through? Like a pop star who's extremely successful and a millionaire and seems to have all the success in life, like what could they be going through that, you know, causes them to get into that state of mental health? But this, it all makes sense, you know, just seeing what she went through, how she reacted. And honestly, if I went through something like that, I'd probably react the same way, maybe worse. But she honestly is an extremely strong person, and I admire her for being able to share her story. And I rated that 4.75 out of 5 stars. Genuinely so happy I read this book. So raw and insightful on what she went through and what she thinks of it all. It's insane how much kids in Hollywood are expected to work, how much the public seems to forget celebrities are real people with feelings, and how much people who seem to care about her betrayed her in every possible way. So if you're interested in reading that. So the next 3 books I read on my Kindle. And the first one I read was Death at Friers Inn by Rob Keeley. And Rob Keeley is a author who actually reached out to me to review one of his books and post it on my channel. So thank you, Rob, if you're for some reason watching this. Thank you so much for reaching out to me. I really enjoyed reading your book. I rated this book 3.25 out of 5 stars. This book is a murder mystery that takes place in London amongst a group of law students. And honestly, that setting was really interesting. I think learning about just like the law terms and everything and just like how law school works, I thought it was really interesting because I personally don't know anyone in law school and have never really been in that world or knew anything about that world. So that was interesting as well. And then also it being set in London. I said this book is special to me because it was the first time an author ever reached out to me to review a book. Thank you, Rob Keeley, for watching my videos and sending me a copy. I enjoyed how this book was around 100 pages, so if you're looking for a short read, I definitely recommend this, especially since it was my first murder mystery of the year and I truly didn't know what to expect. Starting off, the scene setting and the descriptions of the Law Society in London was done really well. I feel like I could picture everything right off the bat. The pacing of the book was relatively normal, not too slow, but not really a page turner either. I also felt as though a lot of the dialogue and the characters were a bit exaggerated and sometimes felt a bit unnatural. The ending did surprise me though. I didn't know that that person would end up being the murderer, so I was surprised. So 3.25 out of 5 stars. The next book that I also read on my Kindle was The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. And I actually read 2 romances in a row for another reading blog. A lot of these books are for reading blogs, but I read this book and then another romance for February because, you know, Valentine's Day and everything. And this is the first romance that I've read in a really, really long time. So it was kind of fun just getting back into that like simple-minded romance. And The Bodyguard, if you are unfamiliar with the story, it follows a woman who's a bodyguard and a famous, attractive man, actor, celebrity. He needs a bodyguard because he has a stalker and he's going back home to go visit his mom because unfortunately she's ill. And in order to not stress out his mom further and because she's ill, he hires a bodyguard, but he needs someone who's undercover. And because this woman is a bodyguard and, you know, she's a woman, she doesn't look very bodyguard-like, he asks her to pretend to be his girlfriend in front of his family so that, you know, they don't know about this threat that could be dangerous to him and his family. So that is that, you know, it's a fake dating trope, close proximity. I rated this 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed the writing style and the first-person POV for the female main character, Hannah. Both Hannah and Jack, main male character, were fun to get to know and flawed in ways I greatly appreciated. In particular, I liked her character development when it came to how she went from not knowing what love is to falling in love so deeply that she realized that everything before didn't compare. I also love how she didn't go back to Robbie because I feel like it would be so easy to get back to what she knew. Robbie is her ex-boyfriend, or what she thought she knew. 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I once again read on my Kindle because it was on Kindle Unlimited and is genuinely now one of my favorite books that I've ever read. It is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. Oh my god. When I tell you this book literally like changed my view on romance novels, it was... And I watched the movie like right after I finished it, the one on Prime Video. And Taylor Zakar Perez and Nicholas Galitzine, the guys who play the main 2 characters in this movie, I loved them. They were so good. But anyway, if you are unfamiliar, this book is about the first female president of the United States' son, so the first son of the U.S., who is half white, half Latino, so hey, half Latino, half Mexican actually, and a romance between him and a prince of England. But anyway, it is a gay romance, but the way that their romance blooms, it's rivals to lovers because everyone in the media is constantly comparing them as like 2, you know, sons of political forces and stuff, and it's like, oh, like who's more attractive, who's more funny, but then they like are forced to become friends after a small political incident that goes on, and so obviously they're forced to spend time together. They realize they're actually in love with each other and just like attempting to hide it because, you know, people aren't as okay with LGBTQ plus people as they should be, because obviously love is love. Everyone should be able to love each other the way that they can, but also with the monarchy in mind. The UK is a lot more traditional than the US, and so they had a much bigger problem with it than the US did. But anyway, love this book. It probably still is my most top-rated book of the year so far. So I said genuinely wow. 4.75 out of 5 stars. I loved almost every single aspect of this book. The romance, the politics, how funny everyone is, and I do have to add, literally, this book, the dialogue, hilarious. Like, I was laughing so much. The cultural aspects, I had so much fun reading this, and I have to say it's my favorite book of 2024 so far. Will probably end up in my top 5 for the year. So that quote still stands. And then the next book that I read is actually my first reread of the year, and it is A Court of Thorns and Roses. So I read this for the first time. I started this book on December 31st of 2022. I remember it so well because I was with my boyfriend at his house at the time, and I loved it. 5 out of 5 stars. Like, I don't have much to say. Like, if you're on Book Talk, you probably have read this book. You probably know how amazing it is. Beauty and the Beast, loosely Beauty and the Beast retelling, but just like the romance, the world building, like the dialogue and everything, just like the tension. Sarah J. Maas knows what she's doing. Like, if you are a reader of any type of romance fantasy books, you know. And I got all my friends, or not all my friends, I got most of my friends to read it this year, and they all love it as much as I do, so 10 out of 10. I then read Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney on my Kindle. This book is about a couple who goes on a trip in an attempt to save their marriage because it's basically on their last leg. They've been having trouble for a couple of months and everything, and so they're attempting to save what they can. And the husband has facial blindness, which means he can't recognize faces, including his own, his wife's, literally anybody he loves, he wouldn't be able to recognize. And both of them have kind of been through extremely traumatic things in their lives, just growing up and everything. And so they're kind of both damaged and, you know, don't have the healthiest ways of communicating. A lot of crazy stuff goes down when they end up at the place that they are attempting to vacation and save their marriage at. It's just like super secluded place in the Scottish Highlands, and there's just a lot of scary things going on. So it was, honestly, I heard a lot of really good things about this book, and I thought it would kind of keep me at the edge of my seat. But even when, like, I definitely think that it did a good job at, like, making me feel scared and, like, making me feel dread. But I don't really think I was, like, on the edge of my seat, like, wanting to keep reading and everything. But overall, it was good, but I didn't really think too highly of it, to be honest. I rated it 3 out of 5 stars. So Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney started off a bit slow, then became interesting, then dragged on a bit longer. I honestly don't know if the thriller genre is for me at this point in my life, but I will try another soon, and I did. I think with my current obsession with romantasy, it's hard to see the pull from other books. But either way, I think it was a fun read at first. I think the layout of the book itself was interesting and enticing. The switch up between 2 characters that I will not name because it's part of, you know, I can't spoil it. But the switch up between them really caught me off guard. Adam, the husband, was boring and was always whining. I don't know why she was fighting so hard for him. And the entire Henry Winter character was annoying too. And, you know, if you read it, you know who Henry Winter is. 3 out of 5 stars. I then read A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle L. Jensen. And I think this is my first book of the month read for this year so far, and this was for March. So it is a romantasy book that I also did a reading blog on if you're interested. It is a fantasy romance revolving around Norse mythology and the gods in Norse mythology. So Freya, who is the main male character, and she's named after one of the main goddesses in this mythological world. She is one of a small group of people who have a drop of blood from the gods, and that gives her special power. So her power is being a shield maiden, which means she has the power to protect herself and make anything into a powerful magical shield. And she is someone who has kind of been walked all over her whole life. And she was married off to someone she didn't like. He treats her horribly, and then eventually sold off to marry someone else who also treats her horribly. But he's like, I want to become king, and, like, I heard that you're going to help me fulfill my prophecy. So, like, let's go make you do a bunch of things you don't want to do, and I'm going to do a bunch of horrible things and everything. Anyway, I actually really did enjoy this book, to be honest. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. I said, I've always been intrigued by Norse mythology, and this book did it for me. I like the political aspects of everything and how the gods played a role. The romance was good, but I think the tension went on a little too long, and it was only resolved until, like, the very end, which I didn't like. I feel like the tension between 2 characters, like a romance between 2 characters, I feel like there's a sweet spot, like, 2/3 of the way into the book. But this was at, like, the 90% mark that their tension was resolved, and I'm like, this sucks, you know? I didn't want to wait this long. So that was, I feel like, that. And then another detail that I think made me not like 100% like 5 out of 5 stars the book, but so I feel like they villainized her so strongly, and it switched up so quickly when they like villainized her, and obviously she isn't the villain of the book, and obviously she's gonna do horrible things when a bunch of horrible people are doing horrible things to her. But I feel like she was such a like good and strong character for so long, and then after this like turning point, they just villainized her a little too hard. And by they I mean Danielle L. Jensen. But anyway, so it was a 4 out of 5 stars. I then read The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. It's still on my Kindle. I finished it like a little less than a week ago. And I think this is one of the first thrillers that I genuinely have enjoyed. I think that it honestly took like 30 to 40% of the book for me to really get into it, just because I think that like there wasn't really anything that was like pulling me in. Like, yes, it was like you were kind of like dreading the next like bad thing to happen, but it wasn't anything that was crazy until there was like a turning point and this like relationship formed with an important character. And then after that I was like hooked. And I do agree that I was surprised with the ending, but I wasn't shocked. Like I wasn't like, you know, but I was like, okay. Like I didn't know that was happening, but you know, I was glad it happened. So, but I think after it did hook me in, I was truly hooked. So, which is why it was a 4 out of 5 stars, but it wasn't anything groundbreaking, but I did enjoy it. And then last but not least, one of my also new favorites of 2024 is Bride by Ali Hazelwood. So this was released this year. I'm pretty sure it was released in January. And this was 4.5 out of 5 stars, like so close to being 5 stars. And I know a lot of people have heard like so many mixed reviews about this, and it's genuinely only because of one detail. And honestly, like I completely understand why that one detail was like can be pretty off-putting to some people, but for me personally, it was just like, oh, like that's kind of weird, but like I got over it. And it's like, this is fake, you know? It's like vampires and werewolves aren't real. Like obviously there's going to be some aspects of the story that we're not used to seeing that like an author wants to make an original point, but it's like this isn't real, like this is fantasy. But either way, I got into the book like right off the bat. I think the relationship and the amount of tension that was held out and then resolved, I think was like the perfect amount of time. I absolutely loved their banter, like Misery, which is her name, the main character, Misery, and the main male character, Lo. I loved their conversations. Like their banter was extremely hilarious to me. And I love like one thing in particular about her that I feel like I relate to so much that I loved about her was that she's constantly speaking her mind. Like she truly doesn't think about and care about the consequences of just like saying what she wants to say. And I feel like I can be kind of like that, and not necessarily in like a super serious like type of way, but like in just like any type of conversation. Like I am an open book. I will say anything, you know? It's like it doesn't matter in my head. But anyway, I didn't say what this book is about. In an attempt to help create a relationship between werewolves and vampires, because, you know, they hate each other, Misery is married off to the alpha of the werewolves. And, you know, at first it's like, oh, like this is horrible. Like I hate you, but also like I don't get along with anyone and blah, blah, blah. But then, you know, they start like forming a relationship and everything. But anyway, all aspects of the book were amazing. I mean, that one little detail, I agree, was a little off-putting, but it wasn't enough to stray me away. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye!